Hello, this is Mike Rutherford, and welcome to Mike on Mike.
Now, when your name comes up and I talk to people, there's kind of a mystery surrounding it. Everyone knows you as a founding member of Genesis, but not a lot beyond that. Why do you think this is?
I guess in Genesis we've always kept our image fairly faceless for a start. There's never photographs of the band on the covers, so they know the music much better than the individuals. Obviously Phil's a different story now, but myself and Tony have always been just, I think, as musicians. And outside Genesis, it's just been a fairly small concern so far.
Are you a private person?
I am fairly. I mean, I don't actually make a point of trying to lock myself away. But I live in England, and I live out of London in the country. In fact, in an area which seems to be full of musicians. It wasn't an intentional move that way. And so I don't mix socially that much with music people. I have two main hobbies, and I'm a great believer in hobbies now, because I was very bad for a long time at switching off. I would go home, and my wife used to say, if you're going to be here, there's no point in being here if your head's not with us. You know, I was miles away thinking about records or songs or what I should be doing. I play a lot of tennis, and I do a lot of horse riding, both of which just take you miles away from work, which I find very important, because I'm a bit of a workaholic too.
All right, well, you were born in Surrey. What kind of childhood did you have? Was it normal?
It was normal. I had two very, very caring parents. But it was fairly lonely, because my father was in the Navy, the Royal Navy. We moved around a lot. And so I never had a base of a friend, like a group of friends, you know, down the street or in the area who you grew up with. And I think it made me fairly shy and quite introspective, really. And so when I got my first little old guitar, aged 8, suddenly I could use my imagination. I had somewhere to go, I suppose.
Now, I know you ran into the members of Genesis, the founding members, at Charterhouse. Were you in bands before that at all?
I had a little school group when I was about 9, two of us, called the Chesters, because we lived near Chester. And then the first school group I had, which was with Anthony Phillips, the founding guitarist in Genesis, was called the Anon, short for Anonymous. And then after that it was Genesis. When
you got to Charterhouse, you ran into a couple of people that were certainly going to take a major role in your life. Could you tell me how you bumped into these people? I mean, Peter wasn't wearing these strange costumes or something.
At school, there were two sort of camps. There was myself and Anthony Phillips, who had the Anon, and then Peter and Tony were together. We were like two partnerships, and we were two writing partnerships. I was in the Anon, and Peter and Tony had the Garden Wall. And we joined forces when I was about 15 or 16, I think. And that's when it really started. We started off as writers. We always wanted to be songwriters. We didn't want to be actually a group. But that particular moment in time, groups were starting out, and they were writing their own material, so there was no chance for young songwriters like us. So the only way we could go forward was to actually form a group.
And originally Peter played drums, is that true?
Yeah, he was always, and I think still is, a frustrated drummer. In those days, you played an instrument, but it was just, if you formed a band, you know, if I was a guitarist really, but the other guy played better guitar, so I played bass. It didn't seem to matter what instrument you played. It's whatever you were slightly better at. There wasn't much choice in it.
Did you all graduate from Charterhouse?
Well, Charterhouse, you don't actually graduate from. Charterhouse you go to from age, say, 13 to 17, and then you go on to college. I got thrown out halfway through, so I didn't...
Why did you get thrown out?
Well, it wasn't even one great sort of glorious act. If I'd blown up a car or, you know, chopped a teacher's legs off, I'd feel better about it. It was just a build-up of little small things, really.
Were you a troublemaker, or...?
Well, they seem to think so.
But you didn't think
that was the consensus. I wasn't that bad. I was unlucky, I think.
How about telling us a little bit about Jonathan King?
Jonathan King, for all his faults, he has a funny reputation in England, did give us a fantastic opportunity. Because in those days in England, you couldn't get in the studio. I mean, now a new group can very easily get a chance to go in and record a single, just something, you know, to show that there's something going for them. In those days, to get any kind of record contract was pretty magical. And he gave us a chance to do a whole record. You've got a bunch of musicians who were very amateur, could barely play well, were hardly a group, were able to go in one summer holiday and record a whole record. Wow. And although we were a bit dissatisfied with it, it definitely excited us and made us realize this is what we want to do. So it was a fantastic opportunity in a way he gave us.
This was the album From Genesis to Revelation?
Yeah.
When the album came out and it didn't do so well, I understand that there was a lot of concern that the group would break up even then. What kept you going at that point?
It seems weird, isn't it? Breaking up hardly before you started. What kept us going really was the fact that session in the studio made us feel that this is what we wanted to do. It just the possibilities of what you could do recording seemed limitless, and we believed that we had something strong and original, and that was enough to give us the confidence to go on. We were very, very confident in those days, which I think you've got to believe in yourself.
Tony Stratton Smith entered around here, now, and he signed Genesis, didn't he, to Charisma? It was interesting that he signed the band based on the fact that the first album didn't do well.
He saw us live. That's the thing what did it, actually, because we'd started playing live by then, and I think he saw enough spark there.
Now the band began experimenting on stage, didn't they, with theatrics and Gabriel trying on the outrageous costumes and things of that nature, right?
Yeah, it really came about because our PA was so lousy, no one could hear a word Peter said. So by acting out slightly, he was able to put the songs across a bit more.
That's an interesting way. I was trying to figure out who was behind the ideas of the theatrics and the stage.
It was him, really, because at that stage the theatrics involved just him. What he wore and how he performed, so it was his personal thing, really. It was very cheap and cheerful.
The first taste of success, I think, for Genesis was '72, wasn't it, with Foxtrot and Watcher of the Sky, Supper's Ready?
Foxtrot, yeah. Well, Foxtrot was the first album that I felt started to click a little bit. I mean, the history of Genesis has always been such a slow, gradual build-up. There were not many moments that we've suddenly jumped up drastically. But that was one of the moments when I felt we started to lock into the English audience a bit.
And then Genesis Live and Selling England by the Pound, and then you get to the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which I think was the record that began to start attracting an American audience, right?
Yes, once again, America. We've been touring America for a couple of years prior to that. It was always very interesting when we played America with The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, the fact that we went out and we played 2 hours worth of brand new music, and we started before the album came out. Yet it worked. I was fantastic, but I was surprised at that because it was quite adventurous. But the American audiences loved it, actually. We actually got fed up at the end because something I haven't realised. What we were doing was just playing a whole live show from one era, which is probably a mistake because you need to play some of the old tunes because it's nice to play across the board because you play songs that you wouldn't have. You played and wrote when you were playing differently, so you get a bit more variety that way. But it was still a good tour. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, but it did create a strain on the group at some...
Just towards the end, it was 100 shows we did. And towards the end, we could have done with a bit of variety, because it was also the other thing is that being a concept, we had to play every song. Whereas normally, we'll finish an album and we'll play every song that sounds good. I mean, some songs just are not live songs. So with The Lamb, we had to play some songs that weren't particularly good live songs.
Well, from here on, Genesis became increasingly popular. I mean, it's just the continuation of the pattern. One album after the next, and then there were three with Follow You, Follow Me, Duke with Misunderstanding, Abacab's No Reply at All. But the band began to move in a different direction. Now, is this all a harmonious effort within the group, or was there a struggle going on like, I don't know, I don't want to do this, or...
No, it was very... I mean, the group can only operate if we all like what's happening. The important album really was Abacab, because we sat down to write this, and we wrote a whole lot of songs which no one's ever heard, which we discarded because we looked at them and we suddenly thought that we were starting to become a caricature of ourselves, which happens to many bands. And what we did on that album was to discard all the stuff, all the material that sounded like areas we'd covered before, and work on the new stuff. And we've applied that technique since then to the last album and to the new one we're doing now.
When did you first find yourself feeling that you wanted to let out some of your other music in a different outlet? In other words, do something outside of the group?
Well, the first person to record outside the band was Steve, actually. And then I think I followed. what happens is that when you're in a band, the initial period, it runs for quite a few years. You have to give 100% of your life and your energy, otherwise the group will never get going. And then after a period of time, it has its own momentum a little bit, and doesn't need so much effort. And then is the time when you realize that, however great Genesis or the band you're in is, you just need to have some new experiences. I mean, if all I ever did in my life was to play with the members of Genesis, I would look back one day and think, well, why didn't I try doing a bit of work with him? Or, it's like being married to the same two people and never seeing friends. It's as simple as that. In our case, the difference really was that it was done not through dissatisfaction with the band, as with wanting a little bit more outside stimuli.
Mm-hmm. In '79, you released Small Creeps Day, right? Now, all of a sudden, you've been kind of in a band context, and you've decided to do your own thing. What are some of the challenges that you faced at that point?
It's just it's the fact you're on your own, and you don't realize how much you rely on the other two in the studio, which is the biggest challenge. Yeah. And I was making all the decisions, and you learn, because suddenly a certain area of music, which is kind of looked after a little bit by Phil or Tony, you have to think about. Sure. So I learned an awful lot more about vocals and drums and keyboards than I had before.
Yeah. Well, the 1982 album was Acting Very Strange. Now, this is where you decided you were going to sing.
Yeah, because it does feel odd when someone does an album on their own, a solo album, and they don't sing, because the voice is so much the character of a song. So I thought, what the hell, I'm going to give it a shot. And I can't sing. So I did, and certain bits worked, but I wasn't very happy. I wasn't happy enough, because when I write a song, I want the best voice in the world to sing it. And the best voice in the world is not my voice in many occasions. So it was once gone. I mean, if you think about it, here I am. I've been a musician for, it was 14 or 15 years then, and suddenly I'm doing something completely brand new. So that again was a good challenge, but I was a bit frustrated in some respects. I like the material. I think it's an example of a whole lot of songs and musical sections that just weren't done as well as they should have been. Yeah. The writing I'm very happy with, but the sound of the record I'm not sure about. The backing tracks was recorded very easily. Great fun. I really enjoyed that. The singing was hard work.
Were you trying to take some voice lessons maybe, or did you just say...
No, too late for that. Definitely too late. No, you can't suddenly learn to sing like that. You just... I mean, because there's some records around sung by people who've got no voice at all, but they make it work. I think that the definition of a song is, does it work or doesn't it work? And it isn't how good the voice is, as much as how convincing it is.
There is a song on this record, though, that I think you did quite well with, and that's the ballad, Hideaway. And that's a beautiful song.
That's probably the best vocal performance. I mean, it's got a rough, cracked voice, but that's because before I started this Mike and the Mechanics album, I listened to Acting Very Strange, Curiosity actually, and I couldn't understand it. It sounded to me like a whole lot of songs that just weren't done quite right. Great ideas.
By a brilliant person.
But, oh yeah, obviously. But the best song of all was Hideaway. That seemed to work.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous ballad. But there's a recurrent image in some of your songwriting. I can quote a lyric for you. It's a dream I thought we might have had, but it's too late. I'm losing you. There seems to be, even on the Mike and the Mechanics, there's a reference to a dream, and it doesn't come true. And
I think lyrically, it's great to write about one's images, ideas, things that don't deliver, hopes that fade. It's that kind of thing. I mean, basically, it's very hard to write happy, for me, very hard to write happy songs.
Why do you think that?
Well, it's much easier to wallow in a bit of self-pity and, push your heart out. It's much more fun.
Yeah.
I mean, classical music, the best stuff. There's not very much happy classical music.
Yeah. So you like to feel bad.
It is, yes.
It makes you feel better, right?
Rent a Heartbreak, definitely.
After the latest Genesis album with That's All, an Illegal Alien and Mama and all that, what did you do? Was there a long tour after that?
Yeah, after the Genesis album, we did a long American tour. Too long, actually. Longer than we'd planned. But what happened in America, suddenly we'd always been popular in the main cities, but we suddenly seemed to break out, and there we were filling up the stadiums in Memphis and Nashville and having great audiences. And it was right for us to play them, I think. So that took up a lot of time. That
when you got back to England, How did you feel?
Shell-shocked. I couldn't get used to living at home. I'd spent so long, 5 months in hotels, I was a stranger in my own house. But then you adjust. And then the first thing I did was to try and develop, was not Kindle Mechanics, I tried to develop my songwriting side. I teamed up with Brian Robertson, B.A. Robertson, who's an English songwriter who's had quite a few hits over there. And he had a television show as a sort of personality type guy. Mm-hmm. And we got on very well, and we wrote some songs to start off, just to get to know each other, of which Silent Running is one collaboration. We were actually developing a relationship, I think, as writers together. After a period of that, I knew we'd penciled in the group album for a few months away, and I thought, do I want to record a solo album on my own? And I thought, no, I haven't got the energy. I had a revelation too in this time period, and that revelation was that I'm not complete on my own, which is fine. I mean, it's no big deal, and it's important for me to realise this, because in Genesis I'm not on my own, and in Mike and the Mechanics I'm not on my own, and I'm much more creative and inspired when there are other people around me and I'm bouncing ideas off. So having realised that, I then set about thinking about Mike and the Mechanics. I think it's important to say that Mike and the Mechanics is not like a hobby, a one-off little thing I just did over earlier in the year. It feels substantial to me. People have a habit of looking upon solo things as a kind of hobby, something you did that summer while the band weren't working. And to me, the people involved and the way it ended up and turned out feels too strong, and the combination feels too good to leave just like that. And it's something I would like to continue.
How did you go about putting the group together? I mean, you had to consider musicians.
Well, what happened really was that we started off as individuals. I mean, we became, I think, a group by about the time we'd finished it. And the biggest difference, really, of the whole album, I think, or one of the biggest differences, was I used a producer, Chris Neal, who comes from a very poppy area, I suppose. He's done all the Sheena Easton stuff, all the first stuff. But he's got a very good musical ear. And I played him all the material I had. A couple of cassettes of endless musical sections, songs, little bits. And he chose the material, and chose very differently to what I would have chosen. I think he chose right, but it was just that outside ear coming in and choosing things made the album sound very different. Very often I would start something and he kind of helped me finish it. He's much better at finishing, and I'm much better at starting, so it was a good combination.
The single, it's a very cinematic song. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like a war story, or
it's very atmospheric. I think I heard it on the radio for the first time yesterday, and what hits you more than anything is this sort of instant atmosphere when you hear it. It's actually just going to go out now with a film coming out, I think, in December, called On Dangerous Ground, as the title track. The film, I mean, the song was finished and then they chose it, but it goes, I think, because it's got the atmosphere. It's a song I wrote with B.A. Robertson,
right,
and was sung by Paul Carrack, and who I think is a fantastic singer. The storyline on Silent Running is about a guy who's travelled light years away, out in space somewhere, and he's ahead in time. Therefore, he knows what's going to happen to his wife and kids back home on Earth, and he's trying to get a message to them to say what's going to happen, the kind of the anarchy, the breakdown of society, and tell them to be prepared and kind of stand up and fight, really. Without realising it, there seems to be a thread in this album. As that song, there's A Call to Arms, which has also got a similar feeling, and also Hanging by a Thread. They're all about a breakdown of, I suppose, the kind of solid structure of society as we have at the moment. I'm not a prophet of doom at all. I'm not, and I'm not paranoid or a depressed individual. I tend to think quite positive, but it seems to be quite apparent on those three songs.
Yeah, but there also always seems to be that there's, I don't know what to call it, benevolent or caution against using force.
It comes back to this thing when I think that so many problems can be solved by mental reasoning or mental powers rather than acts of violence. And the line at the end, teach the children carefully, because one day they'll stand up and fight where we stood still. And I do have quite a strong feeling that I hope my children's generation will be brought up a lot more aware of some of the things that never even crossed my mind when I was their age.
There's a point I wanted to make that you are obviously a guitarist of quite a bit of talent, but you don't put out a guitar album as a solo album.
There's an obvious answer to that, and that is that first and foremost, and I think my most original area is as a songwriter. So that comes first. And I play guitar, so then I play a lot of songs on guitar. But it's the writing side that is my most interesting side, I think.
I find that admirable, though, because most guitarists, given a chance to do a solo album, well, let me show how brilliant I am.
Well, maybe I'm not brilliant enough anyway. I mean, I'm not
No.
but I'm not a guitar virtuoso by any means, so that doesn't really arise.
Mm-hmm. All I Need Is a Miracle. The beginning, the driving beat, kind of reminds me of another song you co-wrote, Turn Me On Again. You see that?
Yeah. I do write quite a few songs in that tempo. The thing that makes Miracle different to me is that it's a happy song, or it's primarily a happy song. It's up. And I don't do that very often.
Yeah.
I think that it's optimistic, it's positive. Maybe not optimistic, but it's a positive attitude to life.
Now, how about on Par Avion? Would it be accurate to say this is an audio letter?
Yes, it's about a guy who's in a wonderful sort of paradise situation, but still missing what really matters in his life. In fact, this song was initially, I mean, a good example how I worked with the producer Chris Neal. My version of this song was quite a heavy version, powerful drums. I was going in a different direction, and he took it this way, and I liked the result.
The next song that closes out the side is Hanging by a Thread. I love the rhythms, the beat, and that sequence with, I don't know what, I guess it's a synthesizer going along down. Dun, dun,
Dun, dun, dun, that one.
Yeah.
Another good example of, it was just a little small guitar riff, which Chris heard and said, develop that, because it could be strong. But on my little tape, it was such a short bit that if you coughed, you missed it, so I didn't rate it until he picked it up. But I like the song. I like it especially because I have a habit of doing heavy songs, slightly heavy metal-y type songs, or one or two on an album. And this is in that genre, but it's not at all, it's quite contemporary sounding, and quite melodic over a heavy rhythm, which is a nice combination, I think. It's the kind of song I haven't actually done quite like that before. And once again, the lyrics have that, the image of, life on the edge. So I like the image, and that seems to apply to quite the other couple of songs on the album, that you're sane, but you could just so easily slip over, or any aspect of life which is ordered and calm, but is very close to getting into chaos.
Now, A Call to Arms, you said that's an old Genesis song never recorded that you always liked.
It's an old Genesis, I call them bits. And do you understand bits? A bit is like a short section of music. It's a Genesis bit that no one else really liked apart from me. So I rang up when I was thinking of material. I actually forgot about it, and I found it on a tape, and I thought, I'd love to make a song from this. So I rang up Phil and Tony and said, listen, do you remember that bit? And I described it to them, and I said, if no one minds, I'm sure you're not going to do it. I'd like to make a song out of it. And they all said, yeah, great, go ahead. And I did, and it's a strong song, I think. Once again, it's got this sort of similar feeling of preparing for some difficult stage in the way of the world, I suppose. I hope it doesn't happen.
That's what I keep
because I'm not at all prepared.
Me either. The last song that closed out the side, that's a nice groove there.
Take it in, yeah. Now this song has to be the teeniest bit you've ever heard on my tape. It was just like, if you close your eyes, you missed it. And Chris picked it out again and said, you work on that. And I like the song very much. It's a very soft song, but it's not a sweet sort of weak song in a sense. And I think Paul sang it. Paul Young sang this one very, very well. I should probably mention who sang.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. So
Paul Young sang All I Need Is a Miracle, Take the Reins, Hanging by a Thread, and Taken In. Paul Carrack sang I Get the Feeling and Silent Running. And there's another singer who sang Par Avion and You Are the One. Their voices are very different, but you hear the album and you don't jump from track to track with that, who's singing now, which is great. Because I think they come from the same roots. Well, when you talk to Paul, he'll probably say that, but they come from the same R&B roots.
Yeah. Now that you've gotten Mike and the Mechanics off the ground, what's going on with Genesis?
I've taken a week off now from Genesis. I'm in the middle of a new Genesis album. We've done 5 weeks' work together, and we've written a large chunk of the album. Just starting to lay down tracks. Feels very substantial what we've done so far. And that will run till the end of January. And then after that, I would like to do some gigs, I think, with Mike and the Mechanics, hopefully here in Europe. Mm-hmm. And it'll be a simple situation, playing small places. But so the whole thing is easy to operate. There's no great loads of roadies and trucks, and it's no big headache. It's just something that is fun. Keep it light. Keep it easy to operate.
Yeah, I see.
That'd be good for us. It'd be a good sort of way to solidify us as a band, I think.
Yeah. What about, as you were referring to the Genesis material, can you give an idea of, like, the direction of the material?
I can't. And at this stage, I don't know, because it's changing every day as we work on the songs. It doesn't feel... I mean, there's some very quiet songs with soft melodies, but there's quite a lot of powerful music so far, I think, more so than the last couple of albums. Mm-hmm. This is how it feels to me. It doesn't feel very lightweight.
Don't you think it's strange, though, that when the members of Genesis do solo work, I mean, you don't know, or maybe you are aware of the amount of rumors that say the band is breaking up, you know?
Well, that's been there for years. I mean, even before we had solo careers, every time we didn't come here for a year, the phone would go and it was all over.
Yeah.
This time, obviously, well, each time round, I mean, Phil's got incredibly successful all around the world, so it makes those rumors fired even more.
Yeah. You said the whole reason for doing any project away from Genesis is to learn something. What do you think you learned from this one, from Mike and the Mechanics?
I learned that I'm definitely at my best in collaboration with other people. I was so much more creative on this album.
Yeah.
I had endless ideas, and it's bouncing off. Paul Carrick and Paul Young were inspiring to work with, and so was Peter Van Hook, the drummer, very much so, and Adrian Lee, the keyboard player. And it was a very creative time for me. The album happened very easily.
Yeah.
There were no uphill struggles.